It's okay to have a drink while we're down here, because we're still working.
Is he running now?
He is running.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about Loki Season 2, Episode 2. Now, this season is not really generating the kind of fan buzz that we saw 2 years ago with Season 1, but that doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, I think the show could even end up topping Season 1. Now, I got some thoughts on this episode I can't wait to tell you about, and a little later, I want to hear from the ScreenCrush Brain Trust, Colton Ogburn and Brianna McLarty. Plus, I got a theory that Sylvie might become the very thing she hates the most that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. I cannot wait to give you my take in these theories, but first, I just have to thank everybody for supporting our channel and shopping our Loki-inspired merch at our merch store at ScreenCrushMerch.com. We have the ScreenCrush variant hoodie, the usual variants t-shirt, Doug as Loki, Miss Minutes as Dolly Clock, and lots of geeky merch that we design ourselves. This is the best way for you to directly support our channel. Thank you for making this a success. Now, I thought this episode was a little bit of a step down from the premiere. Like, the premiere just nailed it for me. We had that amazing Season 1 cliffhanger that we've been theorizing about for years, and I thought that Episode 1 delivered on that and teased all these new mysteries. And the pace of that first episode was so manic. There was like a literal ticking clock. The TVA was about to be destroyed. Loki was being jerked through time. And it also introduced my new favorite character, OB.
Have you heard about how if you fall into a black hole, you turn into spaghetti?
No.
Good. The less you know about that, the better.
Whereas the stakes in this episode were a lot less clear. We started off on this mission to find X5, but then they had to explain why they were even looking for X5.
You will tell us if you found Sylvie when you've had time in holding.
It felt like we missed something between these two episodes. Like, am I alone here, or did anyone else not quite get why they were looking for Sylvie and Brad? Personally, I think they could have had the timelines being pruned like at the start of the episode to add a bit more suspense and give the episode a little more drive.
Yeah, I mean, but the show started with an action scene.
Yeah, and you know what? The Brad foot chase is pretty good, and it was really fun to see Loki finally get to use his powers. But where I think this episode really excelled was its character development. Like, there's been a lot of talk lately about how Marvel shows haven't been structured like normal TV shows. They've been structured like long movies that get cut up into pieces. And I think that WandaVision and Loki have been the exceptions to this rule. So this episode gives us kind of a typical TV episode, the breather. Breathers are episodes where characters kind of step back and take stock of what the hell just happened.
That escalated quickly.
In Game of Thrones, we usually get these episodes like around a big event like the Red Wedding or the Long Night.
I can never be Lord of Winterfell. I can never be Lord of anything. And the Three-Eyed Raven.
I don't know what that means.
So this episode lets us sit back and really look at how much these characters have changed since the first season. Like, Loki is a completely different character from who he was in Episode 1.
The first and most oppressive lie ever uttered was the Song of Freedom.
There are lives at stake.
And the show is really making him face this question. Can he change? Can this villain who always wanted to be a hero actually become a hero? And Mobius has become the most tragic character in the show. He went from being a sycophant for the Timekeepers.
Existence is chaos, and I'm just lucky that the chaos I emerged into gave me all this.
To wanting to have just a glimpse of his old life.
Who had a jet ski?
And now he's reverted. He's afraid of his old life.
I mean, don't you want to see the life you're supposed to live before they kidnapped you and brought you into the TVA?
Not really.
So much of this show really shines when they give these incredible actors space to breathe and really embody these characters.
Hey person, what's that candy you're eating?
Well, boss, this is not candy. This is a chocolatey peanut butter treat from Magic Spoon. They're the sponsor of this video. So lately I've been eating these new protein-packed treats from Magic Spoon. Like, they're great for whenever I want a snack, or they're also really good for like a post-workout because each bar has 11 grams of protein, just 1 gram of sugar, 1 to 2 grams of net carbs, and only 130 calories. So they are a perfect snack for a reluctant grown-up like myself. Now, my favorite is actually this one, the chocolate peanut butter, but the marshmallow one is also pretty great.
I thought Magic Spoon made cereal.
Oh, dude, they do. Like, Magic Spoon makes great cereal. In fact, it tastes like all my favorite cereals from my childhood, but it has no gluten, no soy, and there are 0 grams of sugar. But most importantly, it tastes so good.
Oh, so Magic Spoon fulfills your need for childlike nostalgia while also engaging with you on an adult level.
Exactly, just like our channel. But mostly, guys, it's just fun. Like, we may be grown-ups, but be the grown-up you wanted to be when you were a kid. Eat tasty treats and watch Marvel shows. So Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it is backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if it's not for you, they'll refund your money and you can part ways as friends. So click our link below or scan the QR code on screen right now and use the code ScreenCrush for $5 off your Magic Spoon order and try out these excellent brand new high protein treats, or go to magicspoon.com/ScreenCrush today. Now, Now, back to what I was saying. So, like, Sylvie and Loki still have this chemistry and all of this backstory, and the actors have, like, layered all of these different emotions perfectly. And I loved how this episode really changed Sylvie's dynamic as well. For her entire life, she has always had her mission, and now she's enjoying not having anything to do. She's working in fast food for the same reason Lester Burnham did.
I'm looking for the least possible amount of responsibility.
Like, I feel like episode 1 set the literal stakes for this season. We're counting down to the destruction of the TVA, Multiversal War is coming soon. But this episode really set the character stakes. Loki is wondering if he can be a hero.
You're a villain.
Mobius has to face his fear of happiness. And Sylvie has to overcome her cynicism and help to create a better TVA, instead of just working to destroy the TVA. I mean, she has spent her entire life in dying worlds, and now she actually has a chance to live. So the character stuff, great. Some of the actual episode, not great. Like, a lot of the fight choreography here was just kind of meh. Like, there were some very imaginative parts of the foot chase that, you know, would have been written on the page, like Loki duplication casting Londoners to distract Brad, or like how he created shadows of his Loki horns. But the fight against Dox's people was pretty bland.
Well, what do you mean?
Okay, well, like, so Loki says,
I'll distract them.
but instead of like duplication casting or creating illusions of a larger army, he just runs in and attacks. Like, I feel like this sequence could have been so much fun. Look, you got 2 space wizards, Owen Wilson, and a bunch of time-traveling cops with time gear, but instead the fight just kind of felt rushed and cheap, and it was unimaginative in its execution. Now, if this fight had been in a Marvel movie, it would have been an epic Guardians hallway fight. Here, it was just something that we had to get done fast so we could get to the end of the episode. But the next scene was stellar. When all of these timelines are being erased, these actors can really bring it home. Wunmi Musaku as Hunter B-15 sells this scene. I mean, guys, look, this screen, it's just Missile Command. It's 8-bit lines on a TV screen. But the anguish in her face makes you feel those lives being lost, the birthdays that never happen, the pets that never get adopted. It's a riveting performance. In the Easter egg video, I compared it to Princess Leia watching Alderaan be destroyed. Sometimes you don't need like expensive visual effects showing people dying and cities burning. The human emotion of a great actor is enough. Now, the big question I have though is who warned Dox? In our Easter egg video, I theorized that it was time-traveling Mobius, but I got another theory that I think is even more likely, and I think it completes Sylvie's arc for this season. But I'm gonna get the thoughts of the ScreenCrush Brain Trust. We have our own Brianna McLarty and Colton Ogburn. Colton, what about you? Did this episode do it for you? Like, or was this like kind of a step back from that premiere?
Well, I mean, it was certainly slower, but I think that was the point. And this season actually feels like a television show, just like season 1 did. We've talked about before how some Marvel shows and Star Wars shows on Disney Plus, they feel like chopped up movies. I feel like Loki has always handled that well. If you look at a lot of shows kind of in this genre, like Walking Dead, their season premieres would be really big, and then season 2 was, and then episode 2 of that season would be slower, more character development, and that's what they did with this episode. I love that you mentioned the pie scene. I see, like in a movie, that's something you wouldn't necessarily have time for, especially a Marvel movie. So I love that they're telling these stories in a TV show format, because we got to experience more of like what's going on with Mobius and stuff like that. So actually, like when I started this episode, I thought I might have like missed an episode or something with how it just jumps into it with like Brad Wolf and X5. I was like, am I missing something here? Was there a time jump? Did I miss like another post-credit scene or something? Because it appears that X5, that's the agent's name, right? I'm getting that right. Mm-hmm. He's been on Earth. He becomes Brad Wolf. He's undercover. He's got a movie coming out. Has he just like experienced time longer? What was y'all's take on that? And then they come and find him. I don't.
Well, he's been on the timeline. You know, he's
Like-
been separate from the TVA, so I think he's been on Earth for a while doing this, you know? Just like
longer,
Sylvie has too.
Yeah, like longer compared to perhaps what is passed in the TVA, I guess.
Yeah.
But overall,
Time is- it's like in a good place, the Jeremy Bearamys. It's like time just works different there, and you don't,
Yeah. But overall, I enjoyed the episode. I loved getting to see more of Mobius. I loved that scene where he snapped. I thought that was really cool. Owen Wilson, very talented actor. I mean, for most of his career, you know, he's done like the comedy movies and stuff. So getting to see him really get to delve into this character was really neat. I love OB. He's probably my favorite part of the show.
by far, yeah.
Yeah. And then just one more thing on confusion, because I'm wanting you guys to maybe help explain it to me. Did you notice when they would go like to a different timeline, it would say sacred timeline or branch timeline?
Yep.
We've talked about before various timelines in the sacred time. I was under the impression the sacred timeline was destroyed. And, so how all that is working, if I'm confused, I can only imagine that a casual viewer may be confused, or maybe they're not giving it as much thought as I am.
So, Brianna, you're somebody, I know you love WandaVision. It's one of your favorite MCU things ever. We've talked about Loki season 1 before. You liked Loki season 1. How is this season and this episode in particular working for you?
I definitely like it. I think I had kind of subconsciously lowered my expectations because of Secret Invasion. Honestly, I was nervous, and I was I'm just not going to go in expecting a lot. I really like it. It's not quite where the first season was for me. I think it's had a bit of a harder job to pull off than the first season because it was kind of coming in with all this baggage, and I just think the story is kind of inherently more confusing. And I feel like the pacing of the episodes have been a little weird. It went from being really, really fast in the first episode, which I actually liked because I felt like it matched where they were. And I feel like this episode was a lot slower, and it's not that I didn't like the pacing, it just caught me off guard to do such a big switch. But it's definitely the most enjoyable show for me in a long time to come out of Marvel. It doesn't beat WandaVision. I don't think anything will. I just love that show so much, but I am really enjoying it.
Yeah, when you compare, we did a video just earlier this week about Loki's extremely slow start. I know numbers came out later. Disney Plus said it's one of the highest premieres of all time, but people didn't watch it right away, and I think Secret Invasion turned a lot of people off. It's interesting you mentioned the pacing, like I was talking about earlier. Did you feel like this episode helped us dive into the characters a bit more than the first one?
I do. I think that it was needed for it to slow down. I think it just slowed down really fast. I don't think it's realistic to have a show that is as fast-paced as the first episode was the entire time. I think it would get really overwhelming. As it was, I had a lot of people be like, I didn't know what was happening. So I think that it helped us sort of get our bearings. I feel like I would have liked a little bit more of a gradual decrease, just so it wouldn't be quite so jarring to go from episode 1 to episode 2.
Yeah, I agree, because the stakes were very clear in episode 1. This episode seemed to be all over the place, but like I did talk about earlier, I do think that it did give us a bit more. It really did a good job of diving into character. Do you feel like after this, do you feel like you know these characters a little bit better, or do you think you already kind of knew this and the episode kind of just spun its wheels?
I think I definitely know Mobius better, especially. I think I really understand where he is with this a lot better than I did before. I felt like their little pie scene was an amazing scene, and honestly kind of raises some really big existential questions. It's sort of at the end of Multiverse of Madness, when Doctor Strange asks Wong, are you happy, knowing that there might be versions of you that are happier? I actually really loved that. The character I'm a little confused on right now is actually Sylvie. Just because she kind of went from such a warrior to now almost like a domestic, very calm life. And I do understand that's what she's wanted, but it doesn't necessarily seem totally realistic to me that she could just go from 100 to 0. And I think at the end we're kind of seeing she's not going to.
Yeah, and I think so too. And I got a theory later on about what Sylvie's role is going to play, and it's something I think is extremely unexpected. That when you look at the tapestry of Loki, makes a lot of sense, and is actually going to help her live up to her villain nature in the comics, where she's kind of based on the Enchantress. I have to chime in on the pie scene real quick, because I also want to point out that was a great companion to the other times when Mobius and Loki have truly bonded. The first time was when Loki was showing him the apocalypses and throwing stuff, ruining his lunch. But then they had this wonderful conversation, I think it was in episode 2 as well, last season, about free will, about the timekeepers being real and all this stuff that really set the theme for the entire season. And Brianna, I thought what you said was so brilliant and on point, that conversation in Doctor Strange also mirrors this. Every multiverse story starts with what if. It's you wondering, what if I did this? What if there's Mr. Destiny, It's a Wonderful Life. All these movies have been made about that. And for Mobius to see that possibility and just be afraid, it's really vulnerable. And if you think about last season, he was angry. What if I had a jet ski? He feels cheated, and now to see him retreat, he's such a great character. And he was supposed to just be this random TVA worker, in season 1. Do you guys think that they're doing a good job of building on this season? Did you feel from Loki we're now getting, the first episode last season had to be well, Loki is a villain, and in one episode they had to turn him into a kind of hero. Do you get the feeling he's a different guy now? Is he the most dynamic Marvel character, Brianna?
I think he's definitely up there. I think that to basically go, especially from 2012 Loki, who was like really villainous and really bitter, like very different from sort of like even the Loki we see like later in like Ragnarok. I think he's definitely one of the most dynamic characters. He's up there with like Nebula for me in terms of like great arcs. And it's awesome to see him like this. And I really think I think one of the most interesting things about his character now is even though he's still kind of morally dubious, which I think is a lot of fun, he is worried about the greater good. Like, that is his concern. It's this concern at the end of season 1 where he's like, what if he's right? Like, what if this is going to, like, cause a giant multiversal war and kill tons of people? And he's still worried about that, which is not something that Avengers Loki would have been... Like, he wanted to do that. He says that. He's like, I threw a man off a building because my emotions got the better of me. And so I think it's super cool to see this change, and it didn't feel rushed to me. Like, this feels very natural. I haven't felt like, oh... they just kind of changed him really quick. Having like the build up front of season 1 to now, it works for me. And I like that they like still kept him a little like mischievous. Like, I like that. It would have been, I'm glad he didn't just become like a straight line.
More of a showman, you know, putting the horns on the shadows, even though he was the only person who could see the shadows. You know, there's little touches like that. And also, like the first episode of the series, he says, I put on this show for people. You know, like he kind of gets stripped down to his like base essential elements in a way. But you did touch on this thing about he cares about the timeline, the multiverse, which gets back to what Colton said about this being confusing. If you're watching this and you're confused, it's okay. This is very confusing. The sacred timeline is very confusing. We had to ask ScreenCrush had to ask Michael Waldron, the writer of Loki season 1, what the hell it even means. How could you have different variations and stuff like that? Colton, what I'm seeing here is the sacred timeline still exists, and then all these branches come off of the sacred timeline. So technically, they don't care about maintaining the sacred timeline, but that root timeline, which is 616, has all these different ones splintering off from it. The interesting thing that I talked about in a social video, and by the way, if you're not following us on socials, TikTok, Instagram, we always make videos on there that we don't post here on the YouTube channel. I did point out, though, that it does say 616 point, and then number for all those other timelines, which probably means that 838 is a different timeline. You know, like that opens up a whole weird, confusing mess about things, which gets into what I want to talk about next is the damn show, is the Multiverse Saga too confusing? They've tried to do this visual aid for us to like show timelines as like white branches, and we saw the same visuals in Spider-Man, Spider-Verse, and No Way Home. But is it just too damn confusing, Brianna? Are people going to be able to follow this in Middle America?
I think it is pretty confusing. I mean, some of it I think is overthinking it makes it worse. Like I just kind of take what they're giving me, and I don't think too much about like the intricacies, because then I start to get really confused. I honestly, I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but like 6 days ago, Marvel Entertainment put out like a little graphic with Miss Minutes. It was like a little animated video with Miss Minutes, talking about how like you can call the TVA to go fix these giant butterfly effects. I kind of want them to release something like that that's kind of like cutesy and like seems in world, that's just like a very simple explanation of how it works, like a 3-minute video. I feel like it would be just like cute promotion, but then it's like if you have any problems like understanding it, you can just go back and you're like, oh, here's this like little video, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be like in a show. Just like having that as a reference would be nice, or honestly even just like an actual printed version of like the TVA manual that explains it.
I love your suggestion about a Miss Minutes video, because the way they introduced, like keep thinking Loki season 1, just how brilliant that season was in explaining these weird concepts. Having Miss Minutes explain variants and various timelines and the multiversal war in animated form just worked so perfectly. So you know what? Maybe before Deadpool 3, which is going to be about the multiverse and incursions and things, we could even see a Miss Minutes video like recapping the audience on the multiverse. Because frankly, even like Quantum Mania was still confusing. It's just because it's something that really doesn't exist except in like vague possibilities. I think it is hard for people to latch onto. Colton, what about you? Are people too confused by this? Are America's moms rioting?
I don't think so. I think I have learned to accept that they are going to reveal what is important for us to know as far as how this stuff works. And really, when you look back at like movies like Terminator and different time travel movies and stuff, those don't really make sense either if you put too much thought into it. So I think that could be maybe more of a me problem.
What did you just say about Terminator? Terminator makes perfect sense.
Okay, sure.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry. Finish whatever you were saying that doesn't matter anymore. God.
All I meant was that I think as a fanboy, I guess, who does this for a living, I think I've been putting too much thought into, okay, well, if this is this and that's a sacred timeline and these timelines are in this timeline, it gives me a headache, honestly. So I'm kind of learning to just accept what they show in the show and go off of that. And the million questions I could think of for how this links to that, those are fun, but eventually you have to just stop and accept, okay, they're going to let us know what we need to know and how that makes the story work. And you spoke of Deadpool 3. I do think Deadpool 3 is going to be a moment where maybe we can see this whole thing explained to Deadpool, and maybe he can have like, a lot of questions about, okay, but that doesn't make sense. Okay, but that doesn't make sense. Then I think that would be a fun way to do it and introduce it to a more broad audience. And I think even in Loki, they've broken the fourth wall a little bit with how, like, when OB explains to Loki, oh, you got to do this and you need a temporal aura extractor and all that. Mm-hmm. Loki goes, yeah, that, like, obviously it's really confusing. So it's like they've kind of accepted that, and I guess I'm going to as well.
True, and like the first two episodes, but especially the first episode, did a great job of setting us up for a lot of mysteries. Yeah, the first season was so much easier, I guess, to do this, because the first mystery was, well, what the hell is this place? Who the hell are these people? Who's behind the TVA? And this season has this huge challenge of building on that and creating more mysteries that tie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe without being bogged down by it in the way that, I don't know, maybe Quantumania was a little bogged down in trying to connect Kang to everything else instead of just making him a villain in that movie. It certainly hurt our expectations of Kang in the future. So looking forward, this has been the most fun theory crafting I've done for Marvel since before Quantumania came out. Like, I'm having a blast just guessing what's going to happen in the show. Do either of you have any fun theories for what you think is in store for season 3? I mean, we've seen things in the trailers with Victor Timely and stuff, but like, what the hell is even going on here, Colton?
I have a fun idea that I'm kind of working on right now, but I can give it a little tease for it. I think that Loki, as we saw in his fight with Sylvie in the season 1 finale, he disagreed with Sylvie's decision to kill He Who Remains. He wanted to hear that out a little more. So I am wondering if we could see Loki inadvertently wind back up on the villain side of the story and help Kang the Conqueror, or Victor Timely, or whoever ascends to become He Who Remains, all out of him wanting to save the multiverse. He could say and try to explain. I could see like a great scene of him trying to explain to his brother, like, I'm not the bad guy here. I've changed and I'm trying to do what's right. I've seen things you don't understand. And I think it'd be cool to see Loki, like, inadvertently become kind of like a henchman to Kang, sort of like he was to Thanos, but it's all out of a desire to now do the right thing. It's not out of like a selfish reason now. He's trying to do good. So I think maybe we could see that, and maybe in this season we'll get to see that fight come back up between Sylvie and Loki, because they never really resolved that. They still kind of seem to be on opposite sides of how to handle this. So I think maybe we could see a scene where Loki like snaps and throws in her face like, hey, if you hadn't killed him, this wouldn't be happening right now. So don't be mad at me, or something like that.
Brianna, how about you? Do you have any theories going forward on what's going to happen or where you want to see it go?
This might be kind of out there, and I'm almost nervous to say it, but I kind of wonder if OB's going to end up being a bad guy. Because we've talked multiple times about how this series will probably end up being kind of an Ouroboros. And then we have it's like the first name, like the name of the first episode. And then we have a character whose name's literally Ouroboros. And we've like been wondering like who told Docs. And Obi's like an interesting character because he actually doesn't really need to be from the future. He knows what will happen. One of the things he says when they go downstairs is, "We're all gonna die." He knows from the inside what will happen because he knows how the TVA works. So I kind of wonder if he's going to, like, also thinking he's doing the right thing, but also try to, like, get back to the sacred timeline in order to save everybody, so it doesn't like implode, because he was already really struggling to retrofit the device. So the easier thing would be just get back to one timeline, and there's no need for a new device. And also he's been working on it for like 1,000,000 years, so it is sort of his like life's work, even though I know like lives are kind of weird in the TVA, but you know, like vaguely it's his life work, and he clearly really cares about it. So I don't think he wants to see it destroyed at all.
Yeah, and we did see, you know, the vision of the future that the TVA is about to be destroyed in the future. But like you said, if it is a giant Ouroboros, then the future is the past. The past is the future. The interesting thing about OB is he doesn't seem like his memory's been wiped. He remembers Mobius. Mobius doesn't remember him. So I wonder where that's going to come into play. If like he's the one who maybe, like you said, is the secret villain because he has like knowledge of the entirety of like this whole Ouroboros loop.
I'm anxious to see the scene where Mobius meets OB, like in the past. I think we're still going to see that in the show. Yeah, I'm excited to see that.
Well, I want to thank both of you for joining me. You have to follow Colton and Brianna on socials. Everything is listed below. But now I want to tell you about my theory for how this is going to end and how Sylvie can end up being like the real villain of this show. So here's my theory. Let's think about Sylvie for a second. She is now running away from her responsibilities. She's lived her entire life surrounded by death, and now she wants to live her life.
I want to try everything.
I get that. But we also saw the pain on her face when the timelines were being destroyed. And the way she touched the one who remains temp pad at the end, it's like she's thinking of a plan. Now, Sylvie wants to be left alone, but she also wants to keep the timeline safe. She is a compassionate person who does not want anyone else to suffer. I mean, heck, look at the compassion she showed for her fellow variant B15.
I looked happy.
So I think Sylvie is forming a plan. Maybe she was even looking at the temp pad and realizing that she has the power to become the new He Who Remains. Loki told her that he time slipped, so now she realizes that this temp pad allows her to travel back in time to the past or future TVA.
Okay, so what does that mean? Bring it home.
Well, I think she's going to use the temp pad to go into the future and save Loki, because he told her that they will see each other in the future. And in the future, she will see the TVA being destroyed, and she'll realize that she needs to protect the multiverse and to prevent the multiversal war from ever happening. I mean, if her whole deal is protecting variants and variant timelines, then she wouldn't want to see all those different timelines go to war and destroy each other. Instead, I think that Sylvie would think that she could run the TVA, but do it better. Remember, the TVA exists to make sure that there is ever only one variant of Kang the Conqueror, He Who Remains. But in Sylvie's new TVA, that would not be their mission. They would be attempting to make sure that no version of He Who Remains ever existed. That way, there could be a full multiverse without the multiversal war. But to do this, she would have to get rid of the TVA as it was. Erase it Etch-a-Sketch style, so to speak. So, what's the one thing we know about all the TVA workers?
They are variants who have had their memories wiped.
Exactly. But we've never seen Kang have the power to wipe people's minds. But Sylvie can. I think that Sylvie travels back in time to the past TVA. She defeats the Kang variant who is controlling it, and then she's going to wipe everybody's memories by enchanting them. But then, Victor Timely, aka the Kang variant from the Quantumania post-credit scene, is going to seize the TVA for himself. The recording in episode 1,
You are quite a marvel.
that was Victor Timely. So now Victor Timely will become He Who Remains, create the Timekeepers, and will ultimately set Sylvie on her path, because that path paves the way for Victor Timely. Remember, He Who Remains said this:
I paved the road.
He paved the way for Sylvie so Sylvie could pave the way for him. And he has done this like thousands of times before, like he said.
This whole thing is a circle, but not a real circle. More like a freaky circle.
And I think that once Sylvie realizes what's happening, that she's going to lose control of the TVA, she would be the person to warn Dox. But the warning would be incomplete. She wouldn't get to finish saying what happened at the end of time. She would just time slip or be erased from existence. And thanks again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. Just a reminder, scan the QR code on screen right now and use the code ScreenCrush for $5 off your high protein treats. Or go to magicspoon.com/ScreenCrush today to try the Magic Spoon treats and cereal. So let me know what you guys thought of all this. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.